அகர முதல எழுத்தெல்லாம் ஆதி பகவன் முதற்றே உலகு ஆதி பகவன் முதற்றே உலகு இரவினையும் சேரா இறைவன் இருள் சேர் இரவினையும் சேரா இறைவன் இரவினையும் சேரா இறைவன் பொருள் சேர் புகழ் புரிந்தார் மாட்டு
Namaste. Good evening to all of you. We are presenting the 2nd century text from the Tamil literature, which is one of the South Indian languages. It is called Thiru Kural, which basically means timeless wisdom. This book, it consists of about 1330 verses or couplets. And basically it is a code of life or ethics for following in life, for living a righteous life. So as we go on, we will explain each and every phrase, what it means, the verse, and the significance of Thiru Kural itself. And this project has been made possible thanks to the grant from the Queen's Council on the Arts and from the DC, it's a decentralized grant from the city. And as we go, we'll explain and talk more about Thiru Kural.
The first set of teachings that you just heard, it's basically an invocation. In the culture of music that we represent, carnatic music, which hails from South India, it's customary to start every performance or every presentation of music with an invocation to God. Well, we have many of them. So we start with an invocation to Ganesha, who is an elephant-headed god, and he's believed to be the remover of obstacles. So we're praying to him to remove all of the obstacles of us making mistakes, of the sound system being good, of our audience liking our music, but just to present music in a way that is appreciable and welcoming to our audience. The first thing that we presented was an invocation, and the couplet that we just sang, the meaning of it is, one who loves the praise of God truthfully and faithfully is not affected by good or bad deeds that comes out of the darkness of ignorance. So these teachings are basically just a way of life, and it's like the 10 Commandments, except very many more, because we can't just limit ourselves to 10. So we try to, have something that applies to every phase of life, something that will guide you through all kinds of difficulties and circumstances in life, and that's what this is. The meaning of that phrase that we just presented is the theme is charity. And so the meaning is giving to people who have nothing is true charity, while all other giving, expecting something in return, is not charity at all. And the second couplet we presented was satisfying the hunger of the poor is where someone who actually is the part of giving that creates the wealth that can be preserved, that people actually keep. It's the wealth that you take with you. And I'm pretty sure you're curious about the instruments that we're playing here today. This in the middle and the two instrumentalists who are playing the veena. It's a South Indian string instrument that is very, very old, centuries old, and it's the predecessor to the sitar. The sitar came after the veena, and it's, I believe it came after the veena, is that right? Much later. And the sitar is played in parts of northern India, whereas the veena is played mostly in South India. Do you want to say anything?
we were talking about Thiru Kural, today we are presenting 6 chapters, and in each chapter we have selected 2 couplets and we are presenting, being a short concert. Of course, there are totally 1330 couplets, so it takes a lot of time. But we are presenting just, I could say, a tip of the iceberg, and we are presenting just a small part of it. Just like what you would say Shakespeare is to the English language, almost everybody who learns English language would know either they would have read some works or most of it of Shakespeare. So we could say it is, I would try to use that as an analogy to explain how popular Thiru Kural is. Every person learning the Tamil language would have learnt Thiru Kural at some point. And it's just not learning as a text or just something in literature. So it is like a code of, it's a way of life. And pretty much all these verses are used and to lead the life. What we have done here today is choosing a raga for each of the chapter. And in Carnatic music, it's very common, and I would say not just common, it's always the case that our concerts, all our compositions are lyrical based, and our compositions are always on one deity or the other of the Hindu gods, the polytheist system, and so we have multiple gods, though the Supreme Lord is one. And so most of these songs, and it is, so it's Carnatic music, South Indian classical music is a very devotional spiritual music. And we have tuned all of these couplets in the classical Carnatic ragas. Each chapter is based on one raga. Raga is basically a classical tune of the South Indian classical music system, and which is very structured and has a lot of grammar to it. It's said that it is one of the most structured form of music in the whole world. And just to give you the idea of the Carnatic ragas, so before we start the chapter, so we are playing a brief raga, giving you a flavor of how it sounds in a small form. And the other highlight of this is that we are presenting the Thiru Kural, this verse, the 2nd century text. For the very first time, it is being tuned into music. So all this while, what we have been learning, like most of the things, the way it is learned is as a verse. So all of us, we are taught it as a verse. And for the first time, we have tried giving music to this text and presenting it in the very ancient form of music. So an ancient 2nd century text, the couplets, is being presented in the form of music in a very ancient form of music, which again, the origins can be traced back to the 1,000 years earlier to the Vedic period. And before we move on to the next chapter, I would give it to Sam to give you an explanation of what the verses meant that we presented.
The theme of the verses that we just presented is on not stealing, because stealing is bad. But the verses that we just presented, the first one means that it's not just theft of actual property or someone else's things that is the crime, but even thinking of taking something that's not your own is a crime and a sin. And the second verse is that even if you take someone else's things, someone else's properties, you may have more, but ultimately all of it will be lost. Anything that is not your own, that you've gained through falsehood, will be lost.
வாய்மை எனப்படுவது
யாதெனின் யாதொன்றும்
தீமை
இல்லாத சொலல்
இல்லாத சொல்லல் இல்லாத சொல்லல் வாய்மை எனப்படுவது யாதெனின் யாதொன்றும் தீமை இல்லாத சொல்லல் வாய்மை எனப்படுவது யாதெனின் யாதொன்றும் தீமை இல்லாத சொல்லல் உள்ளத்தார் பொய்யா தொழுகின் உலகத்தார் உள்ளதுள்ளெல்லாம் உடன் உள்ளத்தார் பொய்யா தொழுகின் உலகத்தார் உள்ளதுள்ளெல்லாம் உடன்
உள்ளாத பொய்யா தொழுகின்
உலகத்தார் உள்ளதுள்ளெல்லாம் உடன்
These verses were based on honesty. The first one meant that words that are uttered without harming or hurting anyone, that's called the truth. And the second verse meant that a person who lives without lying and who lives honestly lives in the hearts of everyone. Just to give you some color about this Thiru Kural, the words of wisdom that we're presenting to you today, and to give you some context on the South Indian classical music that we're also presenting to you, the beauty of it lies in how it's been preserved through the years. It's not always written down. A lot of the knowledge that's passed on, a lot of the wisdom is often through word of mouth, and it's often passed down from one generation to the next in not so much of a rigorous schooling, that kind of form. It's more of you learn from your parents, you learn from your elders. It's passed on very very informally, but a lot of it has been preserved very beautifully, and it's managed to maintain its integrity through time and through generations and through wars, all of that. That's part of the beauty of what we're presenting to you today. The couplets that we just presented to you, the theme is nonviolence. If one is to acquire wealth or glory or greatness that comes at the cost of someone else, that harms someone else, that's not to be done. And if a person, well, the next one is actually pretty simple to explain. It's basically just turn the other cheek. And before we continue, I'd like to pass the mic on to my mom, who will introduce everyone who's on stage.
I'm going to start with the vocalist, lead vocalist, my daughter, Sam Samyukta Shivraj, and the lead vocalist in men, Shrikant Vishwanathan, and Leena Daniel, yes, Rama Vedla, and on the veena, Gopanan Srinivasrao, Gayatri Srinivasan, and of course, on the viola, Bridget Bergen. And I would like to specially mention two people who, we have another band, world music band called Charanams, and there are a few of us from Charanams here, and so my best friend and colleague, Marcus Wins on the saxophone, and my best friend, Narendra Bhakar on the tabla. So, Marcus, myself, my daughter Sam, Narenji, we all are part of the Charanams band, and we love playing together, and we have a lot of fun. And even when even when we are not presenting anything in Charanams, we kind of tend to work together, and it's always a joy. And today, the entire team, we have worked hard, and it's a joy to present Thiru Kural with all of them as a team. And again, this is an original composition. The music composition is original, so taking the text from the 2nd century onwards. And as Sam was explaining, every chapter deals with one specific values or principles that we normally adhere to and we follow. And not only is it just a principle, like when we talked about truthfulness, the very first verse says, what is truthfulness? So it doesn't just say, okay, you have to be truthful, you have to do this, do that. It also explains what exactly is being truthful. And of course, typically we used to have a lot of fun when we are rehearsing, and we used to make jokes about this. So like she said, turn the other cheek. So we make these kind of fun. So basically it's very simple to follow and very simple to adhere. And one of it, the meaning for one of the words that we presented, what it says is, you should not consciously lie. So immediately they all started, so can we lie unconscious? Okay, when we are unconscious, we aren't going to know anything. Okay? So what it basically means is, we kind of probably censor ourselves when we are talking to see if we are really saying what we should be saying and what we shouldn't be saying. And the last chapter that we are going to present today is Possession of Wisdom. Let me give it to Sam.
Well, yes, we do have one last chapter, but the one person who hasn't been introduced on stage is, she's my mom, but you guys can't call her mom. Instead, you can call her Nivedita Shivraj. Let's give her a big round of applause. She spent a lot of time choosing the verses that would make the most sense to the most number of people, and the verses that are most universally understood, and she spent a lot of time setting them to music as well. So a lot of effort has gone into this, a lot of hard work, and I'm really, really proud of her. So another round of applause for her. All this while being a mom, a wife, a teacher, the best cook ever. So, right, and that was me exercising wisdom because I have to go back home with her. But possession of wisdom, the verses that we're about to present to you, is keeping your mind. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. That's what that first one is. And the second one is following the steps of wise people of the world and living according to the principles of these wise people. That's wisdom. for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. I hope you enjoyed the concert. I hope you feel the need to look up what Thiru Kural is and learn a little bit more about it. Thank you so much to Queens Public Library for giving us this space and Queens Council on the Arts. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.